Hey guys, it's Brian here. Today I have another 3 steps for you. This is part 3 in my series, 3 Steps for Today to Gain Control of Your Finances. I'll cover the first 6 steps from my previous 2 videos quickly, and then I'll go into detail on these 3 new steps. I will leave a link at the end to those videos so you can check them out. Welcome to Money Talk with Brian. I'm Brian Belcastro with the Money Coach LLC. I've been an investment advisor and banker for 20 plus years, and my goal is to just teach you what I know so that you can improve your finances and succeed financially. If you're interested in getting tips and improving your finances, and this is your first time here or you have not yet subscribed, please make sure to hit the subscribe button right here and hit the notifications bell so that you don't miss any future videos or any future tips. So let's get to the recap. In part 1 of this series, I had 3 steps. Step number 1 was just to get organized. Main thing being, you need to know what's going on with all of your accounts and your finances before you can start making improvements. So get organized, have binders and folders for all your different accounts. Check out the link at the end of this to get more details on that topic. Step number 2 was go ahead and get your credit score. If you don't know if you have a great FICO score or not, just find out what it is and then start taking the steps to go ahead and repair your credit if it's not where you want it. Make sure that you keep doing the right things if it is where you want it to maintain the proper great credit score. Number 3 was to start using credit cards properly. I know there's some famous investment advisors out there or people that give investment advice on YouTube and books and different things that think that credit cards are simply the devil. I think there's some middle ground there. If you have some discipline and use them properly, I see that credit cards can be a great addition to everyone's or anyone who's willing to have the discipline and do credit cards properly. So step 3 was go ahead and start using credit cards properly. Those were the 3 steps in part 1. Like I said, there'll be a link at the end of this video. The steps in part 2, the first step was free banking. I believe banking should be free. Make sure that your situation is set up so that you're not paying any cost. You may have to shop around. If you are paying fees currently, do something about it and get a setup where your banking is not costing you anything. The 5th step was to have your bank accounts properly set up. So important. You want to have your checking and overdraft savings. You want to have a main savings account that's not linked. There's a way to do all this very simply that allows you to start down the path of having all your reserves and everything in place properly, and then achieve financial success from there. But you have to have the basics in place to go ahead and get that rolling. The 3rd step from video 2 and the 6th step overall was to set up your long-term savings account. So this could mean having your 401k at work set up, having an IRA, Roth IRA, having a brokerage account, or a combination of the above. So go ahead and set up your long-term savings account. Now on to this week's 3 tips. Now today I'm going to start talking about some steps that are going to make a big difference, and they're also going to peel back the curtain if you're doing things properly or not. The first tip for today is that you should be saving at least 10% of everything you make. So if you're doing that already, awesome, keep it up. If you look at doing that and you're unable to, that is a huge red flag that you're spending more than you should. So if you can't comfortably set aside at least 10% of everything you make, then you really need to take a sledgehammer to your budget. I'm talking completely cut out cable until you get this rectified. If you have a big cell phone bill, everyone thinks that you just absolutely have to have the latest and greatest cell phone and all that stuff. You don't. I just helped someone this last week. They paid $15 at Target for a phone that's going to allow them to have, calling and texting. Bought it at Target, and it's going to allow them they have different networks, but they were an AT&T customer, and they just put some money on it, prepaid card. So there's no monthly fee or anything. It just is a tool that allows them to take care of their business on an ongoing basis, but it eliminates a big expense that maybe you didn't even know you could eliminate. Also, there's different ways to increase your income. Do whatever you can, get a side hustle. Asking for a raise sometimes is just something that you can do. But you really need to get to a situation where your income is substantially more than your expenses. And everything else kind of falls into place, but the first thing you got to do is do that, and the first thing is to start saving at least 10% of all you make. Another thing with that is when all of your bills are paid at the end of the month, the low watermark on your checking account, in my opinion, should not be less than X amount. So you have to figure out what that is amount for you, but I'd say $1,000. So I like to keep mine substantially higher than that. But if your checking account dips lower at any point in the month below $1,000, I'd say you're probably not doing things right. So set things up so that you have positive cash flow. You're putting 10% into savings, and if you have positive cash flow, then you should have the ability to keep the low watermark in your checking account at a certain level. So that's another thing I'd say. That 10%, if you don't have that set up, and you can just take some if you're able to have enough in your checking account where you have that low watermark of $1,000 and you still have excess, then I'd say have a savings account set up for overdraft protection. Put $500 in there. If it's a different number for you, go ahead and do it. But I'd say 500 is perfect. If you don't have the cash reserves to do that yet, then start filling up that bucket with your 10%. So once it gets to $500, then you're done filling up that bucket, and then that 10% goes to the next step, which is what I would say is your personal savings account. So this is going to be your savings account that's not linked to your checking, and this is where you're just starting to build your reserves. So take that 10% and start putting it in that account on an ongoing basis. Let's get that to $1,000. Maybe you are comfortable getting it to $2,500. Everyone's situation is a little different. You just have to, set up a situation that's going to work for you. What you're going to notice is, as you start setting these things up, you're not going to be a person that's living check to check anymore. Check to check is just that whole thing. I need that check or I can't pay the bills for this current month. But once you start putting these things in place, you're not that person anymore. And so you start building up your financial security. You start feeling more confident that you can withstand the financial hits that will come. This is an example of building moats. You need to, like a castle, how they have a moat around them to protect them from initial attacks? You need to build your financial moats. So the first moat is creating that low water mark in your checking. So if something that you're not counting on comes through, because those expenses always do, you have that $1,000 in your checking that can possibly dip below, and then as your 10% for that month or that period comes in, you could just have some of that go there to refill that little moat up. Then if you have that overdraft savings, that $500, that's an extra $500 where if something happens, that's there for you. And then if you do have to tap it, then that 10% going forward, when things normalize, you fill that back up. And so you have all these different levels of protection. So when that's in place, then you see the pattern here. So then you have that next savings account. If it's $1,000, if it's $2,500, if you have to dip into that, something comes up, then that 10% goes to fill that back up before you start doing the next thing. So you just want to build up moats of security. But it starts by having your expenses substantially less than your income. So take that sledgehammer to the budget if you need to, but get this set up in place. Now let's go to step 2. If you have debt, I still want you to get your budget in line where you can put the 10% towards savings. So as you're paying debt down, you will still be building your cash reserves. So having debt and having no money is one thing. having debt and having a cash reserve is another thing. So there will be a point where it makes sense to take some of your cash reserves to completely extinguish some of the debt. Those are all things that you can figure out down the road. But if you don't have a cash reserve, you don't have options. So what you want to do is keep your credit score strong. So if you do have debt, you're paying early, all of your minimum payments. I want you to structure all of your debt on a piece of paper and really look at where you get the most bang for your buck for paying off debt. So you want to look at what your balance is, how much interest you're paying, and what your minimum monthly payment is. So you want to order them in size. If you can get rid of the little ones quickly, that also gives you momentum and gives you a little step, a little pep in your step, feeling good that you're doing something and going in the right direction. When I'm the happiest is when I'm making progress. So it's all about making improvements on a gradual basis, and then that takes you to somewhere where you're trying to get eventually. But as you're getting there, that's making all these little steps as you're getting there, that's when you'll start to feel good about your financial situation. So I would say take 20% of your income, and if you have debt, that is the amount that you want to put towards your debt. Now you're already doing 10% towards your savings, 20% towards debt extinguishment, and so obviously you know if you're living off of 70% of your income, in my opinion, that's a sweet spot. So live off 70% of your income for all your monthly expenses, 10% goes into your savings, 20% goes to debt to extinguish your debt. Once that debt's extinguished, now what do you have? You have 70% that you're living off of, and 30% is going towards your savings and your future and your investments. And so I think that's a recipe for success. And in the meantime, try to increase your income as much as you can along the way, and so those different buckets will get larger. Okay, number 3. I want you to calculate, if you haven't already, your cash flow, which is simply how much income comes into your bank account that you could pay bills with every single month, and how much money subtract how much money goes out for your expenses. And so you're literally looking at this much comes into my bank and this much goes out of my bank every month. So it's either going to be a positive figure, a negative figure, or in a rare circumstance it'll be exactly 0. So you want to take a look at that. Now, your cash flow needs to be positive to go ahead and take care of the 10% bucket and 20% debt extinguishment. So this will let you know, once you see your cash flow, it'll allow you to start making changes to get in line with a proper situation. Now, I live here in California, and housing is pretty expensive. So you have to sometimes tweak it a little bit. So if you have a mortgage, maybe don't use in that 70% that you're living off of, maybe you don't use the whole amount towards the mortgage in that number, because you do have principal pay down. And so maybe separate that amount out into that 10% of the savings already. So, you just have to tweak things and make it work for you. But that's something that I personally do, because housing's more expensive here. But if you want to, get into real estate, just because things weren't lining up with the 70-30 or the 70-10-20, you're going to pass on living in a place that is great for your family, for your kids? No, I don't think so. So all this is just general rules, but you still have to get in there and make the financial decision that makes sense for your family. Calculate your cash flow, calculate your net worth. So make a detailed list of all your assets and what they would be worth currently, and be realistic, because if you inflate it, it doesn't do you any good. Like if you literally had to sell things today, what is a fair market value minus all the debt that you have, and that'll give you your net worth. This is your scorecard. This is what we want to watch on an ongoing basis. So right now, figure out your net worth. You can look at your cash flow. And so if your cash flow is positive, that's great. If you're paying things off and you're putting things in savings, then your net worth is going to be going in the right direction if your assets are also going in the right direction. So it gets a little complicated, but you want to have where your cash flow is going in the right place into your net worth pool, and then you want to properly allocate your assets so that they perform for you as well. So cash flow and net worth is huge. At this point, you'll know that, hey, I'm doing pretty well, or I need to make changes. It'll be very apparent. But if you've never calculated your cash flow and your net worth, go ahead and do it. Record it. This is something that you have to do on an ongoing basis. I'd recommend at least weekly, and somehow do some sort of printout, or if it's on an Excel spreadsheet, save it, and over time you can look at how far you've come, or if you're not doing things properly, it'll be very apparent because your net worth will be going in the wrong direction, or it'll be stagnant. If you've been following these 3 videos, or maybe this is even the first video you saw and you got all the tips, if you're following these 9 steps while it's just the beginning, you're definitely headed in the right direction. So just simply doing all these things in this video, there's more to come, more detailed stuff, but this is just the basic platform, some basic stuff that you can do to really double check that your finances are going in the right direction, or to start putting your finances where you will be going in the right direction. And over time, you're just going to gain confidence in your finances. You're going to start feeling so much better. You're going to feel the stress go away, having the reserve here and there. Later on, we'll talk about things that once your situation is going in the right direction, you need to protect it from tragedies and different things. So you're going to want to make sure that you have enough life insurance to protect your family. It's very important to have the right type of life insurance. You're also going to want to make sure that you have the right health care in place. When health situations go south, if you haven't planned for that, that can just really set you back on all this financial progress that you've made. So there's little things that are huge that you got to put in place. So the insurances and things like that, we'll talk about at a different date. But right now, we have those first 9 steps. If you haven't yet hit that subscribe button or notifications bell, please do so now. And that way that you can keep getting the future steps and we'll get your finances going in the right direction. If you have any comments, questions, or videos that you'd like to see, please leave me a comment below. So hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you next time.